prenuptial agreements in the event of separation, but the deals have traditionally been ignored by courts in England and Wales.
But a report today from the Law Commission could change that and make the agreements binding.
Let's talk about it with Amanda McAllister, Head of Family Law at the solicitors Slater and Gordon. Morning to you.
Good morning.
I'm interested how many people come to you with a prenuptial agreement or trying to make one?
Very few. It tends to be the wealthy that know about prenuptial agreements and are more concerned about protecting their assets moving forward.
As it stands at the moment, just lay out the scene, because I think a lot of people may be under the misapprehension that prenups, you can have a prenup and it works. That's not the case right now.
It is the case, actually. You can have a prenuptial agreement and the courts can take that into account. And since 2010, the courts are more likely to do that if the prenuptial agreement is judged as fair and reasonable.
But they might not.
But they might not. The problem at the moment is the decision is in the hands of the courts rather than in the hands of the people involved.
Okay, so how does one make sure that a prenuptial is fair? You have to take it presumably to someone like you, do you?
Yes, I mean there are certain guidelines. There has to be disclosure first of all as to the assets involved in the case, and both parties have to know what they're signing. There has to be legal advice. Also, there are recommendations in terms of time limits. Signing a prenuptial agreement the day before a marriage, one could say somebody's being coerced into the agreement, so it's very easy then to argue that it's not binding.
When people come to you, I mean, but have you been in that situation where someone's come to you asking for a prenup arrangement? You've been in that situation,
yes, several
presumably?
times, yes, yeah.
And I mean, what is it instinctively? Does it sound like a silly question, but instinctively, does it suggest there's a lack of trust somehow? I mean, that people are worried about their relationship. Is that a rather naive question?
Not necessarily. I think more clients that tend to come to us are people who've gone through divorce before. They've experienced the turmoil, the upset and the cost and want to avoid that for themselves and their children moving forward.
It's a bit, as Charlie sort of indicates, it's sort of a depressing way to go into it, but does it help, for example, if people are a bit more honest, do you think, before they get married, and does it help if they were then to go and get divorced?
I suppose there's arguments for and against. Some people might say it's unromantic. Some people might say, well, at least you know that your husband or wife are marrying you for love and not money.
Does it change over time? I'm curious about, excuse me, if you have a prenup that you sign, you know, when you're relatively young, 30 years later, with a life completely combined where, you know, you've both done everything for each other, it still stands, does it? I mean, under the Law Commission's proposals, whatever you agree then would stand in perpetuity.
On the basis that it's fair. Obviously, if there are certain changes, for example, in that somebody's needs need to be met, something that could not have been perceived when the agreement was signed, there could still be a degree of discretion, yeah.
And can the prenup preempt changes? So, for example, can you have a prenup that says, whatever happens in the future with my business growing or whatever, you will always get 10% and I'll always get 90%?
You can do that, yeah. Yeah, and you can also determine who gets the dog, the cat. It basically solidifies what your wishes are moving forward.
Thank you very much for your time this morning.
No problem.
Thank you.